Have you ever felt like someone was watching you? Like there was something, just out of sight, lurking in the shadows? I've always been skeptical about the supernatural, ghosts, demons, cursed objects. They all sounded like stories meant to spook kids around a campfire. But now, as I sit here trembling, my fingers barely able to type this out, I'm no longer a skeptic. What happened to me was real. And if you're brave enough to listen, I'll tell you everything. But be warned, once you know the truth, there's no turning back. It all started on an unassuming Tuesday, the kind of day where nothing extraordinary ever happens. I had just moved into a new apartment, a charming little place on the edge of town. It wasn't anything fancy, but it had character. Exposed brick walls, creaky hardwood floors, and an antique chandelier in the living room that looked like it belonged in a haunted mansion. I should have taken that as a sign. The first few days were uneventful. I unpacked, set up my furniture, and even made friends with the elderly woman who lived across the hall. Mrs. Hawthorne was sweet but peculiar. She always seemed nervous, glancing over her shoulder as if she expected something to leap out at her. "You're in apartment 4B?" she had asked, her voice trembling. When I nodded, her face turned ashen. "Be careful, dear. That place has history." I laughed it off, assuming she was just an eccentric old woman. But that night, the noises began. At first it was subtle, a faint scratching sound like nails dragging across wood. I thought it was a mouse or maybe the building settling, but as the days went on, the noises grew louder, more deliberate. It wasn't just scratching anymore, it was knocking. 3 slow, deliberate knocks, always around midnight. "Who's to there?" I called out the first time it happened, my voice shaking. There was no answer, just silence, the kind of silence that makes your skin crawl. One night, as the knocking started again, I gathered the courage to fling open the door. My hallway was empty, but as I stood there, heart pounding, I swear I felt a cold breath against my neck. I spun around, but no one was there. I tried to ignore it, but every night the knocking returned. Always 3 knocks, always at midnight. I even called the landlord, but when he came to check it out, there was nothing there. No signs of rodents, no loose pipes, nothing that could explain the noises. "It's an old building," he said with a shrug. "It's bound to make some sounds." Deep down I knew this was something else, something unnatural. One night I woke up feeling like I couldn't breathe. My chest felt heavy, as if someone was sitting on me. That's when I saw it, a shadowy figure standing in the corner of my room. It was tall and thin, its outline barely distinguishable from the darkness. My heart pounded as I reached for the lamp on my bedside table, but as soon as the light flooded the room, the shadow was gone. I tried to convince myself it was just a trick of the light, but the incidents kept happening. Shadows darting across the hallway, the feeling of being watched, objects moving on their own. One night, I heard my closet door creak open, slowly, painfully, the kind of sound that makes your hair stand on end. "Who's there?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. The silence was deafening, and then from inside the closet, I heard a faint whisper, "Leave." I didn't sleep that night. The next day I noticed something strange. A picture frame on my desk had been turned face down. It was a small detail, something I might have done without thinking, but I knew I hadn't touched it, and when I picked it up, my breath caught in my throat. Scratched into the glass was a single word, "Run." Desperate for answers, I decided to do some digging. I visited the local library and searched for anything I could find about my building. That's when I stumbled upon an old newspaper article from the 1950s, "Tragedy in Apartment 4B. The headline read, the article detailed the gruesome murder of a young woman named Evelyn Carter. She had been found in the apartment, her body mangled and unrecognizable. The killer was never caught, and the case went cold. But what struck me were the details. Evelyn wasn't just murdered, she was mutilated. The coroner's report mentioned symbols carved into her skin, symbols that no one could decipher. Some speculated they were satanic, others believed they were warnings. Over the years, every tenant who lived in 4B reported strange occurrences. Disembodied voices, unexplained cold spots, and the knocking. I found another article, dated a few years after Evelyn's death. It described how a grieving mother had hired a medium to try to contact Evelyn's spirit. According to the report, the medium fled the apartment halfway through the session, screaming, "She's trapped! They won't let her go." The article didn't elaborate on who or what they were. Then there was the journal. I stumbled upon a reference to it in a blog about local haunted sites. The writer claimed that Evelyn's journal had been discovered hidden in the walls of the apartment during renovations in the 1980s. The entries were fragmented, but one line stood out. "They come at night. They knock to remind me they're waiting." The more I read, the worse it got. One tenant claimed to have seen Evelyn's ghost standing at the foot of their bed. Another reported waking up to find claw marks on their arms. All of them moved out within months, but one tenant never made it out. They were found hanging in the living room, a note clutched in their hand that read, "It won't let me leave." I felt a cold sweat break out across my skin as I read the final lines of the article. Evelyn's body was discovered with 3 distinct claw marks across her neck. 3 claw marks. 3 K-knocks. It couldn't be a coincidence. I closed the articles and leaned back in my chair, the weight of it all pressing down on me. Was Evelyn warning me? Or was she part of whatever malevolent force was haunting the apartment? Determined to put an end to the madness, I reached out to a local paranormal investigator. His name was Marcus, and he'd been dealing with hauntings for over a decade. When he walked into my apartment, he immediately froze. "The energy here is heavy," he said, his face pale. Marcus suggested performing a cleansing ritual. "It's risky," he warned, "but it might be the only way to banish whatever's here." That night, armed with sage, candles, and a list of chants, we began the ritual. The air grew thick, and an oppressive weight settled over the room. As Marcus recited the chants, the knocking started. 3 loud, deafening knocks that echoed through the apartment. The candles flickered, and the temperature plummeted. Suddenly, a guttural growl filled the air, and the shadowy figure emerged. The room plunged into chaos. The walls trembled, the lights sattered, and a deafening scream erupted from somewhere deep within the apartment. The shadow lunged at Marcus, who threw a handful of salt at it. The figure let out an ear-piercing shriek before dissolving into nothingness. For a brief moment, I thought it was over, but then the mirrors in the room shattered simultaneously, sending shards flying. In the largest fragment, I saw a face staring back at me. But it wasn't mine. But it wasn't over. The walls began to shake violently, cracks snaking across them like veins spiderwebbing toward the ceiling. Then came the sound of scratching, long and slow, as if something sharp was carving its way out of the walls. My heart felt like it might explode. The lights in the apartment flickered and then went out completely, plunging the room into pitch-black darkness. The only sound was the heavy, guttural breathing of something that wasn't human. It was close. Too close. I could feel the air shift as if something was moving right in front of me. "Marcus, what's happening?" I screamed, my voice cracking in terror. Suddenly, a bone-chilling growl erupted from the darkness, followed by a sharp, deafening sound. A snap, like something breaking in 2. Then, a hand, no, not a hand, but something clawed and grotesque, shot out from the shadows and grabbed my ankle. Its grip was icy cold, and its claws dug into my skin. I screamed and kicked, trying to free myself, but it only pulled harder, dragging me toward the center of the room. "Marcus, help me," I yelled, tears streaming down my face. Marcus fumbled in the dark, lighting another candle, and when the flame finally caught, the room was illuminated for a brief, horrifying moment. The figure in the center of the room wasn't just a shadow anymore. It had a face now. A twisted, monstrous face with hollow eyes that glowed faintly red. Its mouth was impossibly wide, filled with jagged, needle-like teeth, and it was smiling. The candlelight flickered, and then the flame went out again, plunging us back into darkness. But the smile, that awful smile, lingered in my vision like a scar burned into my mind. I felt the claws tightening around my leg, and then I was being lifted off the ground. My screams echoed through the apartment as I was flung across the room. I hit the wall hard, the impact knocking the wind out of me. Marcus shouted something, a chant I didn't understand, and the figure roared, the sound so loud it made the walls vibrate. Suddenly the air grew heavy, suffocating, as if the room itself was alive and angry. The figure lunged at Marcus, but he threw another handful of salt, and for a moment, the creature recoiled, its form flickering like a dying flame. "Keep chanting," Marcus yelled at me, tossing me a piece of paper with the words scrawled on it. My hands trembled as I tried to read the strange foreign phrases aloud. The room seemed to twist and shift around me, the walls closing in, the shadows growing deeper and darker. The figure screamed, a sound that wasn't just heard but felt, reverberating in my chest like a drumbeat. It lunged at me, and I closed my eyes, racing for the end. But then there was a flash of light, so bright it seared through my closed eyelids, and everything went silent. When I opened my eyes, the figure was gone. The room was still and eerily quiet. But the damage remained. The walls were cracked and scorched, the furniture overturned, and the air smelled of smoke and something foul. "Is it over?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. Marcus didn't answer. He was staring at the wall, where 3 fresh claw marks had been etched deep into the plaster. "Not yet," he said grimly. "Not yet." It's been weeks since the ritual, and while the knocking has stopped, I can't shake the feeling that something is still with me. I've started seeing shadows again, fleeting glimpses out of the corner of my eye. And every night, just as I'm about to fall asleep, I hear a voice whisper my name. Last night I found a message scratched into the wall above my bed. 3 simple words that sent chills down my spine. "It's not over." But something else happened last night, something worse. At exactly 3 a.m., I woke to find the covers pulled off me. The room was freezing, my breath visible in the faint moonlight. I turned to grab my phone, but it was gone. And then, from the foot of my bed, I heard it, a slow, deliberate creak, as if someone or something was stepping closer. I froze, my eyes locked on the darkness at the end of the bed. "Who's there?" I whispered, my voice trembling. For a moment, there was silence, and then I heard it, a low, raspy voice, so close it felt like it was right in my ear. "You let me in." The room plunged into a suffocating darkness, far darker than any shadow I'd seen before. My chest tightened, and I felt something brush against my face, a cold, clawed hand. The air grew heavy with the scent of rot, and the voice came again, echoing in my skull. "You'll never be free." I don't remember what happened after that. When I woke up, it was morning, and my room looked normal again. But there, on the ceiling above my bed, were 3 deep claw marks, still smouldering as if freshly burned into the plaster. Now, every night I leave all the lights on, but it doesn't matter. The shadows are still there, waiting just out of reach. And every night, just as I start to drift off, I hear it. The faint sound of knocking, growing louder, closer. Do you hear it too? Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's just the wind. But then again, maybe it's already inside. And as the last knock echoed, a voice whispered, low and menacing, "You let me